Parents made me pay $1,400 for rent, then told me to be grateful for the couch. When my golden brother moved his girlfriend to our room because he got her pregnant, so I moved out 2 weeks later, they were begging to come back because they got an eviction notice. Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest because honestly, I'm still processing everything that went down with my family. This is going to be long, but I promise it's worth the read. I'm Jennifer, 20 female, and until 2 weeks ago, I was living in what I thought was my childhood home. Keyword being thought. Turns out when you're paying $1,400 a month in rent to your own parents, it stops being your childhood home and becomes just another rental property where you happen to share DNA with the landlords. Let me paint you a picture of our house first, because the layout is important for understanding just how screwed up this situation got. We live in this cramped 3-bedroom ranch house in suburban Phoenix. It's not tiny, but it's definitely not spacious either. The bedrooms are all pretty much the same size, maybe 12 by 10 feet each. My parents have the master bedroom with the attached bathroom. My 2 younger sisters, Emma, who's 16, and Sophie, who's 14, share the second bedroom. And the third bedroom, that was supposed to be split between me and my older brother, Jake, who's 22. Yeah, you read that right. A 20-year-old woman and a 22-year-old man sharing a bedroom because our parents never bothered to get a bigger place as we got older. We had bunk beds until I was 18, for crying out loud. Jake got the bottom bunk because he's bigger, and I was stuck with the top bunk, which meant climbing up and down, like some kind of college freshman in a dorm room. The whole rent situation started on my 18th birthday. Not even a day later, actually. I remember because I was still finding confetti from my birthday party in my hair when Dad knocked on our bedroom door with this serious expression. Jake was at his girlfriend Melissa's place, so it was just me trying to study for my SATs. Jennifer, we need to talk, Dad said in that tone he uses when he's about to drop some life-changing news on you. You're an adult now, which means it's time for you to start contributing to the household. I looked up from my prep book, confused. I already do chores and help with groceries when I work. That's not what I mean. He pulled out this printed paper that looked like he'd spent way too much time formatting it. Starting next month, rent is $1,400. I literally laughed. Like out loud laughed because I thought he was joking. $1,400 for half a bedroom that I shared with my slob of a brother who left his dirty socks everywhere and snored like a freight train. Dad, I make $1,200 an hour at Target. That's like almost all of my money. Welcome to the real world, kiddo. If you don't like it, you can find somewhere else to live. That's when I realized he wasn't joking. This was actually happening. My parents were going to charge me $1,400 a month to sleep in a bunk bed in a room I shared with my adult brother. The really messed up part, Jake didn't have to pay anything, not a single cent. When I asked Dad about it, he said Jake was still figuring things out and needed time to get on his feet. Jake had been figuring things out for 4 years since graduating high school, during which time he'd had maybe 6 different jobs, none lasting longer than 3 months. But sure, I was the one who needed to learn responsibility. Mom backed Dad up completely. Of course, she always did. It's important for you to learn how the world works, honey. This will teach you valuable life skills. You know what would have taught me valuable life skills? Having parents who didn't financially exploit their own daughter while giving their son a free ride. But I paid it. Every month for 2 years, I handed over $1,400 to my parents. I worked 35 to 40 hours a week at Target while taking community college classes just to afford living in my childhood bedroom. I ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights because after rent, gas, car insurance, and school supplies, I had maybe $200 left for food and personal stuff. Meanwhile, Jake continued his streak of getting fired from jobs and spending his days playing video games in our room that I was paying $1,400 a month for. He'd have his friends over constantly making noise while I was trying to study. When I complained, Mom would say, "It's his room too. Jennifer, you need to learn to compromise." Compromise? Right. The compromise where I pay all the rent and he gets to treat the space like his personal man cave. The worst part was watching my younger sisters get treated completely differently. Emma and Sophie never had chores, never had to get jobs, never had curfews. When Emma wanted to go on a school trip to Europe that cost $3,000, Mom and Dad just put it on a credit card. When Sophie wanted a new laptop for school, they bought her a MacBook Pro without blinking. But when I asked if they could lower my rent so I could take more than 2 classes per semester at community college, suddenly it was all about teaching responsibility and preparing me for the real world. I started keeping track of everything in a notebook. Every bill I saw, every expense they mentioned, every time they bought something expensive for my siblings. I'm good with numbers. I was majoring in accounting at community college, so I wanted to understand where my $2,400 was actually going. Here's what I figured out. Our mortgage was $1,850 a month. Utilities averaged about $300. So my rent alone was covering about 75% of the housing costs for a family of 6. Jake wasn't contributing anything. My sisters weren't contributing anything, and my parents were essentially living off my income while still having their own jobs. Dad works as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant, making around $55,000 a year. Mom works part-time at a dental office, maybe $25,000 a year. Together, they were bringing in $80,000, plus my $16,800 in annual rent payments. For a family that was supposedly struggling financially, they sure managed to afford a lot of unnecessary stuff. New patio furniture, no problem. Weekend getaways to Sedona, sure thing. Concert tickets for Mom's favorite band, absolutely. But heaven forbid their oldest daughter wanted to take more than 2 college classes at a time. I started spending more and more time away from the house, mostly at the library or at my friend Jess's place. Jess's parents actually treated her like family instead of a tenant, which was wild to experience. They'd ask about her day, help with homework, cook family dinners where everyone sat together. Revolutionary concept, right? That's where I was on the night everything changed. I was at Jess's house working on a group project for my business statistics class when Jake called me. "Jennifer, you need to come home. Family meeting." I checked the time, 9:47 p.m. It's almost 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Can it wait? No, it's important. Mom and Dad said everyone needs to be here. I sighed and packed up my stuff. The drive home took about 20 minutes, and the whole way I was trying to figure out what could be so urgent. When I walked through the front door, I found everyone gathered in the living room with these weird expressions on their faces. Mom looked like she was about to cry happy tears. Dad looked proud. Emma and Sophie were whispering to each other, and Jake was sitting next to Melissa with his arm around her. That should have been my first clue. "Jennifer, sit down," Dad said, gesturing to the armchair across from the couch, where Jake and Melissa were practically glowing. I sat down, still confused. What's going on? That's when Jake dropped the bomb. Melissa's pregnant. The room erupted in congratulations and excitement. Mom started crying actual happy tears. Dad was shaking Jake's hand like he just won the lottery. Emma and Sophie were squealing about becoming aunts, and I sat there thinking, okay, congratulations. But why did this require an emergency family meeting on a Tuesday night? That's when Dad dropped the second bomb. We're going to need to make some adjustments around here to accommodate our growing family. Our growing family. Like Melissa had already been living with us for years instead of just sleeping over most nights without contributing to any household expenses. Jake and Melissa are going to need more privacy and space for the baby. Mom chimed in, wiping her happy tears. So, we've decided they should have the third bedroom to themselves. I blinked. The third bedroom? You mean my bedroom? Well, technically it's been shared, Dad said. That made it better somehow. Right. Shared. The room I pay $1,400 a month to live in. The energy in the room shifted. Suddenly, everyone was looking uncomfortable except for Jake and Melissa, who were looking at me like I was being unreasonable. "Jennifer, don't be dramatic," Mom said. "We've set up the couch in the living room for you. It's actually quite comfortable." I stared at her. "You want me to sleep on the couch?" "It's temporary," Dad said quickly. "Just until we can figure out a better arrangement. And I'm still paying $1,400 a month for this privilege." Jake finally spoke up. "Come on, sis. Be happy for us. This is a big deal. Oh, I'm supposed to be happy that I'm getting kicked out of the room I pay for, so you and your girlfriend can play house. Jennifer, that's enough," Dad said in his warning voice. "Melissa is going to be part of this family. The baby is going to be part of this family. We all need to make sacrifices. Sacrifices? What sacrifices are you making? What sacrifices is Jake making? I'm the only one who's been sacrificing for 2 years. That's when Mom dropped the third bomb. And this one was nuclear. Actually, we're going to need to raise your rent to $1,500 to help cover the additional expenses of having a baby in the house. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Even Emma and Sophie looked shocked. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. You want me to pay more money to sleep on the couch while my brother and his girlfriend get the room I've been paying for? Jennifer, please try to understand. Mom started, but I held up my hand. No, I understand perfectly. You want me to be grateful for the couch? We never said that, Dad protested. You didn't have to. It's pretty obvious. I stood up. When is this arrangement supposed to start? Well, Melissa's already 3 months along, so we were hoping you could move your things out this week, Mom said gently, like she was doing me a favor. This week, the sooner the better, really. We want to start getting the room ready for the baby. I looked around at my family, my parents, who'd been financially exploiting me for 2 years while giving my brother a free ride. My brother, who'd never paid a cent toward household expenses, but was now getting a free room upgrade for getting his girlfriend pregnant. My sisters, who were watching all of this like it was some kind of reality TV show. Okay, I said. Everyone looked relieved, like they'd expected me to throw a tantrum. I'll move my things out this week. Thank you for being so understanding, honey, Mom said. I knew you'd do the right thing. The right thing? Sure. I went to the bedroom. My bedroom that I'd been paying $1,400 a month for, and started looking around at all my stuff. My desk where I did homework. My bookshelf full of textbooks and novels. My dresser with all my clothes. My bed, which was actually the top bunk that I'd been sleeping in since I was 8 years old. Jake followed me in. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for being cool about this. I know it's a big change, but get out. What? Get out of my room. I need to pack. He looked confused. Pack? You're just moving to the couch. I turned to look at him. This 22-year-old man-child who'd never paid for anything in his life, who was about to get handed everything he wanted because he got his girlfriend pregnant. No, Jake, I'm moving out. The color drained from his face. Moving out? What do you mean moving out? I mean, I'm leaving, finding my own place. You can have the room. But who's going to pay the rent? And there it was, the real reason for his panic. Not that he'd miss having his sister around, not that he was worried about my well-being. He was worried about who was going to subsidize his existence. That's not my problem anymore. I pulled my suitcases out from under the bed and started packing. Jake just stood there watching me, looking more and more freaked out as reality set in. Jennifer, wait. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe you could keep half the room and Melissa and I could take the other half. Melissa's pregnant, Jake. She's going to need the whole room for baby stuff. Besides, I'm not paying $1,500 to share a room with a couple and their crying infant. $1,500. I thought it was $1,400. Mom and Dad raised it to help with baby expenses, remember? He ran his hands through his hair. Okay, look, maybe I can contribute something. Like maybe I can pay part of the rent. It was almost funny watching him panic as he realized the gravy train was about to end. With what money, Jake? You got fired from your last job 2 weeks ago. I'll find something. Sure you will. I kept packing while he stood there trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Eventually, he left me alone, probably to go tell our parents about the impending financial disaster. It didn't take long for the emergency family meeting round 2. This time, Dad led with a guilt trip. Jennifer, we understand you're upset, but you can't just abandon your family. Abandon my family? I've been financially supporting this family for 2 years while being treated like a second-class citizen. That's not true, Mom protested. We've always treated you fairly. Fairly? Jake doesn't pay rent. Emma and Sophie get thousands of dollars spent on school trips and electronics. I pay $1,400 a month to sleep in a bunk bed and eat ramen noodles. We're teaching you responsibility, Dad said, falling back on his favorite excuse. No, you're exploiting me. There's a difference. That's when they switched tactics. Mom started crying. Real tears this time, not the happy pregnancy tears. Jennifer, please. We can't afford to lose your rent money right now. Then maybe you should have thought about that before deciding to kick me out of the room I pay for. We're not kicking you out. We're just asking you to be flexible. Flexible, right? Flexible enough to pay $1,500 to sleep on the couch while my unemployed brother gets a free room upgrade. Dad tried the stern approach. Young lady, you're being selfish and ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Dad? Name one thing you've done for me in the past 2 years that you haven't done for Jake. Silence. I'll wait. More silence. That's what I thought. Jake tried jumping in with promises. He'd get a job immediately. He'd start paying rent. He and Melissa would figure something else out. Too little, too late, Jake. Melissa, who'd been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. Jennifer, I'm really sorry. I didn't know this would cause so many problems. Maybe Jake and I should look for our own place. It was the first reasonable thing anyone had said all night. That's probably a good idea, I said. No, absolutely not, Dad said immediately. You're going to be family. This is your home. Interesting how quickly Melissa became family, while I got demoted to problematic tenant. Emma, who had been watching all of this with wide eyes, finally spoke up. Why can't Jennifer just keep her room? The couch in the living room turns into a bed. Jake and Melissa could sleep there until they find their own place. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. Out of the mouths of babes, right? But Dad shut that down immediately. Emma, you don't understand the situation. I understand that you're making Jennifer pay money to sleep on the couch while Jake doesn't pay anything to get a room. Even my 16-year-old sister could see how messed up this was, but my parents were committed to their plan. I could take it or leave it, so I left it. I spent the next 3 days finding a new place. Turns out when you've been paying $1,400 a month for half a bedroom, you can afford a pretty decent studio apartment. I found one about 15 minutes from my college and 20 minutes from my job. It was small, but it was mine. No roommate, no bunk bed, no family drama. The security deposit and first month's rent wiped out most of my savings, but it was worth it for the peace of mind. Moving out was surreal. I'd lived in that house for 20 years, and suddenly I was packing my entire life into boxes. My parents kept trying to convince me to change my mind, but they weren't willing to change any of the terms of their ridiculous arrangement. You'll be back, Dad said as I loaded the last box into my car. This is just a phase. You'll realize how expensive it is to live on your own. I've been essentially living on my own for 2 years, Dad. The only difference is now I won't be subsidizing everyone else's lifestyle. Mom was crying again. Jennifer, please don't do this. We're a family. A family doesn't financially exploit its members. Mom. Jake and Melissa helped me load some of the heavier boxes, probably motivated by guilt and the knowledge that they were about to inherit a significant financial burden. Jake kept apologizing and promising to get a job, but we both knew his track record. Emma and Sophie were the hardest part. They didn't really understand why I was leaving, just that their big sister was moving out. I promised them they could visit my new place anytime, and I meant it. The first week in my new apartment was incredible. I could study without Jake's friends being loud in the background. I could eat something other than ramen because I wasn't paying most of my income to my parents. I could sleep past 6 o'clock a.m. on weekends without Mom vacuuming outside my door. I was finally living like a normal 20-year-old instead of a financially exploited tenant. But the real vindication came exactly 2 weeks after I moved out. I was at work restocking shelves in the electronics section when my phone started blowing up with calls from home. First Mom, then Dad, then Jake, then Mom again. I ignored them because I was working and figured if it was a real emergency, they'd leave a voicemail. They did leave voicemails. Lots of them. The first one was from Mom. Jennifer, honey, call me back as soon as you get this. We need to talk. The second was from Dad. Jennifer, we've got a situation here. We need to discuss some things. The third was from Jake. Jennifer, please call back. It's important. The fourth was from Mom again, and this time she was crying. Jennifer, please. We need your help. I waited until my break to listen to all of them and call back. Mom picked up on the first ring. Jennifer, thank God. We need to talk. What's going on? Can you come over after work? It's complicated. Just tell me over the phone, Mom. I heard her take a shaky breath. We got an eviction notice. I almost dropped my phone. What? The landlord is evicting us. We have 30 days to pay what we owe or move out. What do you owe? Another pause. 3 months of mortgage payments. 3 months. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, and they were just now panicking about it. How did this happen, Mom? We were counting on your rent money, and Jake's been having trouble finding work. And Melissa's pregnancy has been expensive with all the doctor appointments and preparations. The picture was becoming clear. They'd been living paycheck to paycheck, using my rent money to cover their mortgage and expenses. When I moved out and Jake couldn't replace my income, they'd fallen behind on everything. Jennifer, we need you to come home. We can work something out with the room situation. Maybe you and Jake can go back to sharing. No. What? No, I'm not coming home. I'm not bailing you out of this. Jennifer, please. We're your family, a family that was perfectly willing to let me sleep on the couch while paying $1,500 in rent. We can change that arrangement. No, Mom. You made your choice when you decided I was less important than Jake and Melissa's comfort. Dad got on the phone at that point. Jennifer, stop being childish. We're facing eviction here. And whose fault is that, Dad? We made some miscalculations. You made some bad decisions. You decided to treat your daughter like a cash cow while giving your son a free ride. Now you're dealing with the consequences. We'll agree to lower your rent back to $400, he said desperately. For half a room that I'd have to share with a couple and their baby. We'll figure something out. You had 2 years to figure something out, Dad. The time for negotiations was before you tried to make me pay more money to sleep on the couch. Jake got on the phone next. Jennifer, come on. I know I messed up, but I'm actively looking for work now. I've got some interviews lined up. Some interviews. After 2 years of unemployment and a dozen failed jobs, I'm different now. Having a baby changes everything. Having a baby should have changed everything 2 years ago when you found out Melissa was pregnant. It shouldn't have taken an eviction notice for you to take responsibility. The calls kept coming over the next few days. My parents, Jake, even some extended family members who'd been told I was abandoning the family in their time of need. My dad's sister, Aunt Karen, called to lecture me about family loyalty. Jennifer, I can't believe you're being so selfish. Your parents raised you, clothed you, fed you, and charged me $1,400 a month for the privilege starting on my 18th birthday. That's different. They were teaching you responsibility. They were exploiting me, Aunt Karen. Jake didn't have to pay anything. Jake was in a different situation. Yeah, he was in the situation where he was the favorite child who could do no wrong. She hung up on me. My grandma called next, trying to guilt-trip me with stories about how family sticks together through tough times. When I explained the rent situation, she got quiet. They were charging you how much? $2,400 a month to share a bedroom with Jake. And Jake wasn't paying anything? Nothing. Another long pause. That doesn't sound right, Jennifer. It wasn't right, Grandma. I had no idea they were doing that. Turns out my parents had been telling the extended family that I was contributing to household expenses, but they'd never mentioned the specific amount or the fact that I was the only one paying anything. When Grandma confronted my parents about it, they tried to spin it as teaching me life skills. Grandma wasn't buying it. You don't charge one child rent while letting the other live for free, she told my mom. That's not teaching life skills. That's playing favorites. The situation at home kept getting worse. Jake managed to find a part-time job at a pizza place, but he was making maybe $800 a month, nowhere near enough to replace my $1,400 contribution. Melissa couldn't work much because of pregnancy complications, and she didn't have health insurance, so the medical bills were piling up. My parents were scrambling to find ways to make up the income shortfall, but it wasn't working. Dad picked up extra shifts when he could, but he was already working 50 hours a week. Mom tried to increase her hours at the dental office, but they didn't have full-time positions available. They put the house on the market, but the real estate agent told them they'd need to bring money to closing because they owed more on the mortgage than the house was worth. All those years of using home equity loans to pay for Emma's Europe trip, and Sophie's MacBook had left them underwater. 3 weeks after I moved out, Mom called me sobbing. Jennifer, the bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. We're going to lose the house. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. Please come home. We'll give you your room back. Jake and Melissa can sleep on the couch. What about when the baby comes? We'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. Like you figured out that it was fair to charge me $1,400 a month while Jake paid nothing. We made mistakes. Yes, you did. And now you're living with the consequences. Jennifer, please. Your sisters are going to have to change schools. We might end up in an apartment in a bad neighborhood. Is that what you want? It was a low blow bringing Emma and Sophie into it, but I couldn't save them by sacrificing myself again. What I want is for you to take responsibility for your own financial decisions instead of expecting me to bail you out. We raised you better than this. No, Mom. You taught me that family members exploit each other. I'm just choosing not to participate anymore. The foreclosure process took about 6 months. During that time, my parents kept calling, begging, promising things would be different. Jake managed to keep his pizza job, but even working full-time, he was only making $1,600 a month. Not enough to cover what I'd been paying, and definitely not enough to make up for 2 years of financial mismanagement. The desperation in their voices during those phone calls was something I'd never heard before. Dad, who'd always been so confident and authoritative, sounded defeated. Mom, who'd always had an answer for everything, was reduced to begging and making promises she couldn't keep. Jennifer, what if we gave you the master bedroom? She offered during one particularly pathetic call. Your father and I could move to the small room, and Jake and Melissa could take Emma and Sophie's room, and the girls could share the couch. The mental gymnastics they were willing to do now that their financial security was threatened was almost impressive. Suddenly, everything was negotiable. Everything except the fundamental issue. They'd spent 2 years treating me like a second-class citizen while financially exploiting me. What about when the baby comes, Mom? You want a newborn sleeping on a couch? We'll figure something out. Maybe we could convert the garage into what? A bedroom? Mom, listen to yourself. You're talking about putting family members in a garage because you can't admit you made bad financial decisions. The calls from extended family members got more frequent too. Apparently, my parents had been reaching out to everyone, painting themselves as victims of circumstances beyond their control. Aunt Karen called me crying, begging me to help save the family home. Jennifer, this house has so many memories. Your grandparents visited here. You took your first steps in the living room. How can you just let it all disappear? Aunt Karen, those memories aren't going anywhere just because the house gets sold and I didn't create the situation. I'm just refusing to be the solution to a problem I didn't cause. But family helps family. Family doesn't charge one child $1,400 a month while letting another live for free. Family doesn't kick the paying child out of their room to make space for the non-paying child's girlfriend. That usually ended the conversations pretty quickly. They eventually lost the house and had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. The apartment complex was one of those generic places with beige everything and paper-thin walls. Emma and Sophie had to transfer schools mid-year, which was especially hard on Emma, since she was a junior and had been looking forward to graduating with her friends. Jake, Melissa, and the baby, who was born during all this chaos, were crammed into one bedroom while my parents took the other. The baby cried constantly in those first few months, and the thin walls meant nobody got much sleep. I heard about this from Emma, who called me crying one night about how stressed everyone was and how different everything felt from their old life. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jake finally had to live in cramped conditions, except now he was doing it with a girlfriend and baby instead of just a sister. Emma and Sophie were both angry about the situation, but not at me. Emma especially had figured out that our parents' financial priorities had been seriously messed up for years. I can't believe they charged you rent, but bought me a $3,000 Europe trip, she said when she visited my apartment for the first time. They made their choices, I said. Bad choices. Sophie was mainly just confused about why our parents had treated me so differently, but Emma was old enough to see the bigger picture. She started asking questions about college funding and whether our parents had been saving for her and Sophie's education. The answer was no. They'd been living paycheck to paycheck for years, using my rent money to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Emma's Europe trip, Sophie's MacBook, the weekend getaways, the new patio furniture. It had all been funded by my $1,400 monthly payments. So, basically, Jennifer paid for my trip to Europe, Emma said when she figured it out. Don't feel guilty about that, I told her. You didn't know. But she did feel guilty, which wasn't fair to her. She'd been a teenager who'd been offered an opportunity by her parents. She couldn't have known they were funding it through financial exploitation of their other daughter. The whole situation created a lot of tension in what was left of our family. Emma and Sophie started questioning other things our parents had done, wondering what else they'd lied about or hidden. Jake and Melissa were struggling with a new baby in a tiny apartment while Jake worked at a job that barely paid the bills, and my parents were dealing with the reality that their golden child wasn't going to rescue them financially, and their cash cow daughter wasn't coming back. I felt bad for Emma and Sophie, who'd been innocent bystanders in all of this. I made sure to stay in touch with them and help them when I could, tutoring Emma with her math homework, taking Sophie shopping for school clothes, things like that. But I didn't feel bad for my parents or Jake. They'd made their choices based on favoritism and greed, and now they were living with the results. The final insult came about a year later when Jake and Melissa broke up. Turns out the stress of being broke with a baby was too much for their relationship. Melissa moved back in with her parents, taking the baby with her. Jake, now 23 and single, had to move back in with our parents in their 2-bedroom apartment. He was sleeping on the same couch they'd wanted me to pay $1,500 a month for. Emma texted me about it. Jake's back on the couch. The same couch he wanted you to pay rent for. Karma's yeah, it really is. I'm 22 now, still living in my studio apartment, which I've since upgraded to a 1-bedroom place closer to the university where I'm finishing my accounting degree. I work part-time at an accounting firm and make enough to pay my bills, save money, and actually enjoy my life. I see Emma and Sophie regularly, and we have a good relationship. They both understand now why I had to leave, and they don't blame me for the family's financial problems. I don't see my parents or Jake much. They occasionally reach out when they need money. Jake's car needs repairs. They can't afford Emma's prom dress. The apartment rent went up, but I've learned to set boundaries. The last time Dad called asking for help, I told him exactly what he told me when I was 18. Welcome to the real world. If you don't like your situation, you can find somewhere else to live. He didn't appreciate the call back. Emma's graduating high school next year, and she's planning to move in with me while she goes to community college. She learned from watching my situation, and she's not planning to let our parents take advantage of her the way they did me. Sophie's got a few more years at home, but she's already making plans to get out as soon as she turns 18. She's seen what happens when you become financially dependent on people who don't have your best interests at heart. As for Jake, last I heard he was still working at the pizza place and still living on our parents' couch. Melissa lets him see the baby sometimes, but she's moved on and is dating someone else, someone with a real job and his own apartment. Mom and Dad are still in the same small apartment, still struggling financially, still acting like victims of circumstances instead of people who made bad choices. They've asked Emma to start paying rent when she turns 18, which is how I know they haven't learned anything from this whole experience. Emma's response was to apply to universities in other states. She'd rather take out student loans than repeat my experience.